What's up, everybody? Kai's back here, and today I figured with the upcoming release of Baten Kaitos, Return of Wings in the Lost Ocean, and Baten Kaitos Origins, getting a remaster this summer, which is awesome. Been waiting for this for a long time. That I do a possible tips and review guide for the game and how much I recommend the game, and just go from there to give you guys a little bit of insight. It's pretty much going to be spoiler free unless I slip up. I'm pretty much going to talk about a few things here. We're going to talk about a little bit of the lore, what kind of game it is, the characters that are shown in the intro trailer. You're going to know who your party members are right away. We're going to talk about the world, stuff like that. Things like the voice acting, combat, grinding, the leveling, all that stuff, and just give you a little bit of insight in what you're getting into. So, as you can see here, they announced that we're getting a remaster, and they're calling it Baten Kaitos 1 and 2, the HD remaster, and this is the summer of 2023. Now, I'm super excited about this, but I'm also scared after they apparently botched the Tales of Symphonia remaster. So, hopefully they don't mess this one up too much, because this game deserves a lot more praise than it gets. And one thing I'll say about it, some of you that don't even know this game might have actually heard some of the music, as one of its songs from the second game is actually in one of the Super Smash Bros. Stages. They just never brought a character over. But originally, this is the first game, Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings, and the Lost Ocean on the GameCube. And it was made by Namco. And then we also have Origins, which this will be the second game. And so you know where they chronologically fall, it goes Eternal Ocean first, and then Origins is a 20-year prequel, which puts you in the same world, which is kind of cool, because you get to explore it 20 years earlier, you get to see some of the characters at their earlier stages of life, and you also get cool party members in this game as well. Now, the opening cinematic in the game is pretty cool. I won't spoil it. It's a nice, like, I think 1.5 minute cinematic intro. Pretty cool. Shows off like what you're gonna be getting into, gives you a lot of the lore right off the bat. And I guess we'll talk about a few things about why it's my favorite game of all time. I've probably beaten it maybe 10 or 11 times through my life cycle, and I've always just enjoyed it. Just something about the story, the music, the way the combat flows, all ties into just a great adventure. And the prequel itself, while it's not, I don't like it as much, it's still very good, and you just get a good 1-2 shot game back to back. And it could take you anywhere from 30 hours probably to 40, 45 hours to beat the game. It usually takes me about 30 nowadays to do most of everything and finish the game up. And the reason I bought it is kind of interesting. So back in the day, we used to have a Blockbuster, as well as many other people. And I would go in, I was probably like 14, 15 at the time, and I would occasionally be allowed to pick out a game. My mom would let me pick out something. And I remember seeing this game on the shelf, and I looked at the front, I'm like, oh, that looks really cool. That might be something I like. And then I turned it to the back here, and you see all the characters, but there's this little image right here. I'll try to blow it up without distorting it. It's literally an ice cream village. And I was like, dude, this looks stupid. Like, why would there be an ice cream village? And I actually put the game back on the shelf, and I was going to walk away. Thought about it, I came back and I saw the front cover again. I was like, dude, this just looks really cool, and I've been looking for something to play. I just gotten over like a big Tales of Symphonia kick. The game had came out like a year before. Played it and beat it like 7 or 8 times in that year. And I really wanted something new, so I picked it up. And I really, really enjoyed it. And this was at a point in my life where the house I was in actually caught fire, so we were moving from a hotel while the insurance settled everything. And this game was the one game I had with me to take on my travels TV. I had my GameCube, I had like a little tiny like TV, and I would bring this game with me, and that's pretty much what it was. And it just has a lot of great memories for me. But we're going to go into what kind of game it is. And it is a standard JRPG, turn-based, crazy lore, crazy things, airships, because airships are at every JRPG, thick plot, and it doesn't play like your traditional turn-based. There's deck building and cards involved. That's how the combat revolves around. It involves around you being able to make a deck of cards for each character, and executed that deck in turn-based combat. And you'll play a card and then your character will do an action on the screen and so forth. So, we'll go more into combat a little bit down, but we're going to go into the characters first. So, you'll have 6 playable characters, and your party limit will be set to 3. So you're going to have Callus, who's your main protagonist. The only thing I'll tell you about him is right at the bat, you know he has some memory issue. He has trouble he doesn't remember, like, immediate events that have happened. He knows, like, past events, stuff like that. And he's gone through some kind of tragedy, which you'll see from the start. And he's your main protagonist, and he's a pretty cool character. He's pretty strong overall. Has the most potential for sure. And then you get Shella. She's a quick companion who comes along. She's a magic user, and she dabbles in 6 different elements of magic. Okay, then you got Gabari. He's like your laid-back, tough dude. Little bit arrogant at times, but he's the older, wise character in the party at times too. And as you can see, he uses a paddle for a weapon, which is kind of cool. And that's something you see in a lot of games. He uses a 2-sided paddle as his weapon. Then you got Liud. He's an Imperial soldier who starts to have second thoughts on what his empire is doing. And he eventually joins the cast. He uses a gun. Then you got Savina. There's a little bit of mystery around her. I won't say too much about her, but she's very quiet to herself. But she's a straight up just fist brawler fighter. She's kicks, punches, all that kind of stuff. Uses like little, she uses like knuckles. That's the best way to use it. She uses like brass knuckles and stuff as her weapons. Then you got Mizuti. He's another magic user, or he or she, I won't say because of the mask. Is another magic user, and they're very similar to Shella, as we'll call it. But I guess you can tell their names: Callus, Shella, Gabari, Liud, Savina, Mizuti, and they use different elements. They could use the same, but their ultimates are different elements, which we'll go into in the combat screen. Now, you can only use 3 at any given time, and this is one of those JRPGs. The ones that are in active battle are going to get the most experience. The ones that are not will be behind, and you can always pull them out and level them. But they will get a little bit of experience, but they'll just be behind if you use one party, which I usually tend to do. For my preference, I'll just tell you, there isn't really a bad character, but I've always just used the starter 3. I know a lot of people like Liud. Liud is very strong, and a lot of people like Mizuti. Savina's okay, but that's more of a preference thing. They're all capable of beating the game. There's also a 7th character, which is you. And I know that sounds weird, but Callus is bound to something called a guardian spirit, and there are points in the game he will discuss things with his guardian spirit, and he will ask questions or state an opinion, and you'll get some dialogue choices to give as you will speak to him. You're a spirit from another world giving him power. Now, the spirit has a couple functions, which it will affect combat, but we'll talk about the non-combat first. Certain dialogues you choose will actually influence how helpful he is in combat, because you're trying to create a bond to this character. You're trying to be on the same page. So if he suggests, like, hey, I want to do choice A, but you clearly oppose it, you choose choice B, there's going to be a split, and he might not help you as well in combat. I believe that's how it works. But if he chooses choice A, and you tend to agree, you'll get more out of it. But again, I wouldn't say don't worry about that. There have been times I disagree, and he'll still help you in combat and do certain things. Just pick what you'd pick. That's the best way to do it. Play the story how you want to play it. We're then going to talk about things like the world. The world is pretty big, and unlike traditional RPGs, you're not on the ground, you're in the sky. So all the continents in this game are floated in the sky. There's a thick thing of poison below the continents that are like the clouds below, and people don't know what they're called, what's down there, and they just call it the taint clouds. They assume that's the end. There's multiple continents. There is Sadal Sud, which is more of your smaller continent. It has more naturey stuff. It's run by a lord named Rodolfo, and it seems more like a high manor and then a bunch of people just making it by. It seems more of your poor neighborhood town, and it's not too big. Then there's Diadem, Land of the Clouds. It's covered in clouds as it sounds, and it's run by a King Laticon, and he seems to be a nice, graceful, peaceful king. and his people seem to love him, and they have the proud knights of diadem with them. And then there is Anui Nui, which is like more of a magical continent. They study magic, and they have scholars and all kinds of things on that continent. It's run by a queen known as Cordelia. I think it's Cordelia. It's been a bit since I played. I know, I gotta replay. I'll probably replay it soon, actually. But yeah, it's run by a queen. And then there's Mira, Land of Illusion, and it's a land that constantly shifts between time dimensions, so things are constantly changing. And this is where things like that ice cream town occur, and things make a little bit more sense of to why that exists. But it's constantly shifting through the time. It's run by a duke. And then there's the Empire, Alfard, and this is run by your typical controlling empire that wants to, rule the world, which will be made apparent very much in the trailer. And it's run by a Gelderblame, and it travels far, as so much to know as the citizens are very stuck up, stubborn. They think they're the greatest. They all live in these houses made of gold, and you quickly dislike the area. But that's pretty much talking about the world, the main 5 continents. Now, these are some of the visuals. This was a game for the GameCube, and I always thought it was stunning. Like, this is just a visual, and like, look at the detail on some of like the things, like this area right here. And I think I have one more. This is like what a town looks like. You have the lighting. I thought the game itself looked stunning, and I could only imagine a remaster is going to make it look better. And I honestly can't wait to see the visuals of the game. I always thought they were great just to look at. Like, you'll see the first like zoomed out portion when you're on the continent like world map screen, and you'll be like, damn, that looks really awesome. And it was very ahead of its time, in my opinion, for the time. I think it still looks great today. Lore we went through music. This is one of the songs you hear often in Baten Kaitos. And what I will say is the music is in like my top 5 of all time. Like, I would put it up in the ranks of Chrono Trigger with Chrono Cross, the Donkey Kong 2 Country series. We'd probably put Octopath 2 up there, and anything from the E series. Those are like my top soundtracks, and this definitely is up there. I found myself listening to a lot. There's very few, if any, soundtracks from like I don't like them. I tend to like most. I love most of them, like even more so. I think the music's very good. We're gonna talk about a couple of the cons in between. So the 2 things that seem to get to people are the voice acting. The voice acting is not very good. It sounds like they were talking in a vacuum, or there's constant echoes. At times it's okay, but then at times, oops, my alarm, sorry. And then at times it's just very like, what the hell? Like, where'd they record that? And you learn to live with it. Like, I got used to it, and I don't mind it as much after playing it so much. So that's one thing I wonder if they're going to improve the remaster, if they're actually going to do new voices. They might, because I know that that's one of the biggest complaints of the game, is the voice acting isn't too good. But it's okay. At times it's good. You get used to the echo, and it won't bother you as much as I think it bothers some people. The next thing is in combat. It's more so the mages, but they repeat their attacks. So, for instance, if you cast 5 of the, say, fire attack, which when we go into combat, you'll see what I'm talking about, they'll literally say it 5 times in a row. You'll hear fire burst, fire burst, fire burst, and it just gets a little bit repetitive after a bit. That's one thing I kind of hope they just take out of the game, because none of the other characters really repeat their attacks unless it's their ultimate, which makes sense to me. We're then going to talk about character combat abilities. So they all get to build decks of cards. Now, Gibari and Callus, which are Callus, Gibari, are a little bit more unique than everyone else. So, well, everyone has attacks and defend cards in their deck. Gibari and Callus have a slight advantage, as their attacks can also be used to defend. They usually come with smaller amounts of defense than normal defense, but it gives them the ability to defend, which is very, very, very strong. So it allows them to put less defensive cards in their attack and go more offensive, and still be effective in both regards. The rest of them have separate attacks, separate defense, and as we said, magic users. You got your attackers, and then 2 more of your attackers, but with a little bit more versatility. Now, we're going to talk about combat. Let me take a drink of water. Did I just close my combat tab? I did. Let me find another one. So if you go here, Baten Kaitos Combat. Let's get a good image. I want one that's going to actually show it. Like, this one is pretty good. So we'll probably just choose this one. Let me open the image in a new tab. Perfect. So, your typical battle screen, how it will work is you will draw a set number of cards, which will increase as the game plays, and you'll be able to play a set number of cards on your turn. I think early it starts as 2, then eventually you play 3, then 4, and so on. Now, how it works is you're going to draw a hand like this. And this will be a pre-constructed deck, which we'll go into in a bit. It starts pre-constructed, and you can modify it with cards you find. So, you have your attack cards, which are, in his case, swords. You have your defend cards, which is a shield. You have your specials, which are these. This is a weird special, which we'll go into in a second. And then you have cards that aren't either, and just do certain things. And then there's also healing items, which won't be shown, because he didn't draw one. Now, when your turn draws, and it's your turn to go, to attack, you'll have your cards in your hand, and in this case, he obviously has more than 2 cards, so it's a little later in the game, but he chose to play a sword, a fruit, which is a poisonous fruit, and a sword, and it looks like he can play more cards. So, he's going to play this card, and it's going to attack. He's going to play this card, and it's going to attack. Now, how it works is you'll play 2 cards back to back, and then there'll be a delay, and then you'll be able to play another card once he does the attack animation. You can keep continuing your chain. As I said earlier, you'll be able to do 2 cards, and then 3. In this case, he's doing more. So, he'll attack, and at the end of his attack, it'll show a total damage, and then it will go to whoever the next character's turn, and they'll get to do the same thing, and so on. Now, while he's attacking, what it does good is it grays out the shield, because it doesn't want you to play it. So it means you can't play that card when you're attacking. It's a defend card strictly. But he can play anything here. Now, let's say he only has 5 attacks here. 1, 2, 3, 4. He could either choose to finish with just the normal attack, or he could end with a super. Now, supers are indicated with these, and these are just high power attacks. They do more damage normally than your swords or basic attacks, but eventually good basic attacks will start to out-level some of these, and these will be worthless, and you'll replace these. Now, in the case here, he's selected here. Now, this is a weird card, because it doesn't have this, which implies a super. Now, remember when we talked about your Guardian Spirit earlier? During times in combat, he will just randomly, if you have a good relationship, go, hey, you're making a combo. Let me help you with that. He's going to change a card that might not be so good or wouldn't be as impactful to a special super that can be played that turn. So in the case, this card right here could have been a blue dagger, and he turned it into this. So now he has a super at the end that's very, very powerful. That will do a lot more damage than your normal supers. So that's the way your Guardian Spirit will help you. So as a refresher, you'll play your basic attacks, and then you'll play a super usually to finish it. That's usually how it goes. Now, when it's the enemy's turn, your defense will highlight, and obviously these would gray out as well as the camera would gray out. Now, you can defend any way you'd like. You could play whatever defense you want, and you could, in his case, he could use swords too, which makes him a little bit stronger, and you'll defend as many attacks as you can. Anything you don't defend, you'll take damage from. Anything you block, you'll only take damage from if the attack is higher than the defend. And so on. So that's how that pretty much works. Then there's healing items. Now with healing items, I must emphasize on the GameCube. They will default to targeting your enemy. You have to hit the right trigger. At least that was on the GameCube. I don't know how it's going to work on the Switch. You will have to hit a button to where it will auto-target your characters, and then you can cycle it through which character you want to heal. Now, you can play as many healing items as you want as long as you can play that many cards. So if you have 5 cards you can play in your turn, and you have 5 healing items in your hand, you could drop 5 heals on one character. But again, once you target a character, that's who gets targeted for the turn. So if Callus needs to be healed, Echella and Gabari all need to be healed, you can only heal one of them, but you could use multiple heals on that same character. Now, it's important to know, every time you play a card, it will draw a card out of your deck, which has the deck number here. He has 30 cards left in his deck. So it will draw a card for your deck. So if I play this camera, I'll draw a card to replace it immediately. So you'll be able to combo and keep drawing for your deck. Which leaves some RNG in it. but you got to build your deck to the best of the ability with balance. Now, we talked about healing items. There's also things like this, Rotten Fruit. It's an attack item, but it doesn't do any damage. This will just have a chance to poison the enemy. You also have a camera, which will take a picture at the end of the fight, and it will give you an option to loot that picture at the end of the fight, which we'll go into a little bit later. So just remember there's a camera function. Now, once combat's done, you'll get experience and so on, and you'll get some loot. Sometimes you'll get mandatory loot, which is like, okay, you get this no matter what. But then on the left side of the screen, it might say, hey, you took a picture. You could either take the picture you took, you could take the item it dropped, or you could take the second item it dropped. You have to choose one. So it gives you a little bit of choice. You get to pick like one item. And that's pretty much how combat works. You'll just go back and forth, and you'll be attacking and defending and swapping. And the one important thing to note too is when you run out of cards in your deck, let's say he plays this card and he has only one card in his deck, he draws his last card, plays it. On his next turn, you won't get a turn. He has to spend his turn reshuffling the cards that he lost back into his deck. So you end up wasting a turn. So it's important to manage your turns, because there might be certain times that are more optimal to shuffle. Maybe when you're full health, you go, okay, now's a good time to shuffle because I lose a turn, me getting hit isn't a big deal. But if you're low health and you're about to shuffle, you might want to think about that. Maybe not play as many cards. Now, I'm sure you guys are wondering what these numbers up here are. And in some cases, as you go later in the game, there will be a number on every corner. And those cards will be, when you find the item, they'll have that number on them. And you kind of can build your deck around them. Now, I'm going to say you don't have to do this. I've beaten this game without even paying attention to the numbers. Now, how the numbers work is you see up here how he's playing them in order. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say he has 5 attacks. If he plays 5 attacks and he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he looks to play a 5, he will get a huge damage multiplier. So in this case, while a special is tempting to play, you might actually want to play this Ice Dagger, because it has the 5 in the corner. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he'd get a huge damage multiplier. Now that would have worked if he did it in the reverse too. He could have also went like 5, 4, 3, and then ended on the super at 2, or this one down here at 2, and he would have got a huge damage multiplier. It also works if you play the same number, like 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. And why there's different corners is because the top right one is the default number. If you just click the card to play, it will default play that number. But on the GameCube at least, I don't know how it's going to work on the Switch. If you use the C-stick in the diagonal direction, it would select that card for you. So instead of clicking A in the GameCube, I could hit diagonal down left and it would select the 2 for me and automatically play that card as long as I'm hovered over it. So that's how that works. So again, these are known as spirit numbers, and if you play them in order or play successive numbers, you will get a big damage bonus. And that's one way to improve your damage in the game. And when I talk about big damage, I'm talking like 3 or 4 times the damage sometimes. It's a huge multiplier. And it's definitely worth it. That's why sometimes, even if you can play 5 attacks, if you only have 8, 7, 6 in your hand, and then it breaks off to like 3, 3, 1 as your next card you'd get, it might be better to play 8, 7, 6. But again, don't worry about it too much. Worry about getting your attacks off. And worry about the spirit numbers as you learn the game. That's the best way to do it. I've beaten the game without doing spirit numbers whatsoever, and it's fine. Now, as you can see, too, there's like different colors. So in Baten Kaitos, there's 6 different elements. There's fire, water, light, dark, wind, and Chronos, which is also known as time magic. Now, there are polar opposites of each other. So water and fire are opposites, dark and light, wind and time. Now, why this is important is, let's say Callus has a sword that says it has 40 attack, but 22 of it's light damage. So 22 out of 40 of that attack is light damage. And then he has a dark sword in his hand as well. Let's say this is a dark sword here instead. And that has 40 damage and 22 dark attack. If he plays both on the same turn, the light and dark will cancel each other out, and he'll lose 22 damage on each sword. So in that case, the 22 light and the 22 dark damage would cancel each other out, and he would just be left with the generic base damage of the sword, which will make it much weaker and you'll do much less damage. So it's very important when balancing your decks that you don't mix too many elements together. Like, you could have all 6 of your deck, but make sure you have priorities where you're going to get maybe one more than the other. So in the case, if I have tons of water in my deck, I might not want a lot of fire in my deck, because it will just, they'll coincide and mash with each other and cause each other to do less damage. It's the same way when blocking. If you have a time shield and you block, and then you have a wind shield and you block, the wind portion and time portion of the extra defense that you get would nullify because of the contradicting elements. But where this does come in handy, the elements, let's say the enemy's weak to fire, they're going to take additional damage from your water attacks and so on, and they'll take less damage from your fire attacks. So what's good in this game is characters tie themselves to more elements than the other. Like, Callus tends to have a little bit of everything, but he has tons of time attacks. So you could build tons of time, and then you at least guarantee the time, and then you can mix it with other elements. Like, for instance, you can mix elements with elements, just not with contradicting ones. So time can mix with fire, and it can mix with dark in one combo. Or time can mix with water, and it can mix with light in one time, because they're all 3 different elements, but none of them impede each other. So in this case, he could totally play this water sword, this light sword, and this wind attack all in one turn, because they're different elements, but they don't have any of their opposites involved. And you'd still get maximum damage. So that's pretty much how the combat works for the most part. One other key thing I should mention, when you're blocking, let's say you have a bunch of junk in your hand and you don't have any blocks and you're getting attacked, you're going to see like prompts to react with a block card when they're about to attack. So you'll play like the shield. Now let's say you don't have any more blocks in your hand and you really need to block. You could choose to hover over certain cards and discard them during each one of his prompts. So during his next attack, you could choose to discard this to draw a card. And it's a very good way of thinning your deck and getting what you need, or getting to healing cards quicker. Like, you're like, okay, I need to get to heals. So you could, like, play this, block. Prompt 2 comes up. I'm going to discard this. You draw another attack, unfortunate. I'm going to discard this. You now draw a heal. You're like, okay. So you've taken 2 attacks at this point because you've discarded instead. Your 4th card you draw is a block. You play it, you block the attack. And that's pretty much how it works. You don't heal after combat. You have to use items to do that. But you can usually manage in-game to use your heals that you draw in your decks, because they're not gone one and done. Like, anything in this deck is not one and done. It's, you use it for the combat, you'll have it next combat. And when I say next combat, I should actually say next time you shuffle. So next time you shuffle, all those cards will be back in your deck to use again. So we covered elements, we covered order. Now we covered rewards. You'll get to pick between certain rewards, and then some will be mandatory. We'll then cover things like shops, getting better cards, and resets. So the cards they call in this game for reference are called Magnus too. We'll get into that later. But occasionally during your travels, you run into shops, and the shops have set things they sell. It's always the same items, but the shops might sell multiple of the same sword, which could be good, because having 6 of these ice swords might be better than having 6 of the base swords. And then it makes doing water element very easy, and anything that's fire weak will take a ton of damage. So you could buy whatever you want. You'll get money as you play the game, and those shops will refresh over time. So after some time has passed, you can come revisit that shop, and its stock will refresh. You get more of the same thing that you want. So that's how shops work. Getting better Magnus in general. There are farm spots in the game. Like, I'm just going to throw one out there. There is a place way later in the game called Imperial Fortress where Gabari could farm, where this wind paddle drops. And I farmed like 20 of them just to fill his deck with them, so he has no contradiction to element. It was the strongest paddle he could get at the moment, and I just filled his deck to make sure I keep drawing that paddle. And then he has very good turns where he's not contradicting elements, just hitting super hard. And you can grind there as much as you want. And that's where the grind becomes fun, because there's very good item drops in enemies. Like, regular enemies have very good item potential drops. Like, you'll come to learn, like, oh, this guy's dropping a fire sword. That would be cool. Let's farm him. Oh, this guy seems to be dropping a wind sword every 3 or 4 battles. Let's farm him. Oh, this guy drops these jewelry boxes which sell for 5,000, which is really good. Let's farm him up. This is all also Baten Kaitos music. So yeah, you'll be farming certain Magnuses, and you'll be resetting the shops to kind of complete your decks. Let me just turn this down a little bit. Item evolutions. This right here, this fruit, is the example of an item evolution. Now, as you get certain things in the game, they can change. Not everything changes. Like, most shields and swords won't change. But things like food and things like... yeah, it's pretty much the food items that do it. So, for instance, you'll get a piece of fruit that says it heals 90 HP. Let's say it's an orange. I know it heals more than that. We're just going to put a number out there. Let's say it's an orange. You'll be able to use it as a healing item, but then eventually, over time, you'll go to your deck and be like, why do I have a rotten fruit in here? Your orange will have expired and turned into a rotten fruit. So instead of healing, now it's going to poison the enemy. So you'll need to be wary of that and constantly be checking your decks every so often, which you will be because you'll keep constantly finding new magnets to add and change into your deck. And just be ready to change those things and replace it with a new healing item or whatever. In some case, for instance, the very first healing item you get, called a bamboo shot, which heals 45, will turn into an offensive piece of bamboo that does really good damage early. And it evolves a couple times. And for instance, milk, which heals 115, will turn cheese, which heals 140, which will eventually expire into something else. So it's very crucial to pay attention to certain things on the evolutions of items. Now, there will be side quests in the game. I recommend doing them, especially at the end of the game. You'll know exactly what I talk about. There's a ton of them. Do all of them. They're very well worth it. They end up giving your character one of his ultimate equipables, and I recommend doing them. And not much to say on the side quests. You'll be doing them. You'll be busy with the main story. You'll be enthralled in it, hopefully. And then, as for grinding and leveling, so this doesn't level like a typical JRPG. You could do 1,000 fights and you technically won't gain a level. You'll be like, hey, why am I not gaining a level? Now, throughout the game, you're going to run into these flowers. And I can show you one here. I think I have one. See it? Like right back there. There's a blue flower. So there's actually two kinds. There's a red flower, which if you step into it, it will allow you to save your game. Typical save point in any game. If you see a blue one, there is save the game and visit the church. Once you click visit the church, you'll go to a different zone, and there will be a guy you can talk to. Now, this guy is who gives you level. He will look at all the experience you accumulated from the battles, and he will tell you how many levels you can gain. And you'll just click the level, and your stats will skyrocket. Now, it's kind of unusual. I didn't like it at first that you just don't level, but it is kind of cool if you've been grinding for a long time. You go back, and your character has 10 levels waiting. You'll hit level 10, and your stats will just skyrocket. Because your stats will go up, which are your typical strength, defense, agility, stuff like that. Those will all increase as you play the game and level. And it's kind of cool just to see a big increase of stats. It lets you know how hard you worked in a way. I kind of see what they were going for. It lets you know you were working really hard. Here's your reward. Now, in addition, he's also going to have a thing that says class increase. Now, this is what's as important as levels. Throughout the game, you'll find items that give class increases to certain characters. Now, the class increases are what increase your effectiveness in combat. So, for instance, remember when I said you start with like 20 cards and you get 2 attacks? When Callus finds his first class increase, you'll take it, you'll go to the guy in the church, as we'll call it, and he will increase your class to level 2, which will now allow you to have 25 cards to your deck, so you can add 5 free magnets to your deck. And it will allow you to play 3 cards in your turn. It will allow you to play 1 additional card, as I said, so you get to play three attacks. It will also allow you to discard, I think, extra cards. That might be the first or second. I might be mixing them up, but you can discard more cards. So it's very important you get your class up. Now, I know one thing some deck builders are going to say, well, wouldn't it be smart just to run a small deck of 10 cards that guarantee the 10 best cards you get draw? No, because this game was smart about that. Any card slot that is empty in your deck is replaced by a pass card, which is just a waste card. So you have to fill your deck. And again, it's about becoming with a good balance. Like, for instance, I think at the end game, when you have 60 cards in your deck, like for Callus, I think I have about like 45 attacks in his deck since they can all block as well. I have like 10 blocks, and then I have like 5 like healing items for him, or like 4 to camera. And that's pretty much it. And that's how the leveling and class up works. You'll also, the only equipables you'll find in games, each character has like an equipable accessory slot. You'll find them, they'll increase the stats, and they'll increase like resist to certain things. So you'll want to make sure you find those equipables as well. And then reminding, because I mentioned the camera, I was going to forget. That's another way to make good money in this game. So if you take a picture of an enemy, and you choose to take that as your reward at the end, you can take tons of them, and you'll get better cameras that do this faster and faster throughout the game. The picture needs time to develop, which means running around, doing more fights. If you go to town and try to sell that picture you took immediately, it hasn't developed yet. They'll offer you like two, whatever it is, 2 gold, or I forgot what the money currency is. They'll offer you 2. But if you wait and wait and wait, and it develops, and you go back later, which could take, I think, 10 minutes. And I think later on, it gets to like 2 minutes or 3 minutes because you get better cameras. He might give you like 1,500 or 2,000 or like 10,000 or 12,000. And especially boss pictures. I'm going to say this right now. Boss pictures are the most important thing to take. They'll give you a stupid amount of money to spend in the shops. You'll constantly be spending in them. So I recommend taking pictures all the time. Other than that, difficulty of the game. I remember the first time I played it, there were a couple spots I got stuck. It does take some strategy and knowing what to do and how to play the cards, and it might seem difficult at first, but just keep trying, keep deck building, keep a good balance of attacks to defense. You generally want more attacks to defense in your deck. Like, just for reference, you're definitely going to want heals on everyone, and then there might be some weird cards you run on certain people that are neither or, like cameras on everyone, just to make sure you get a picture. And, yeah, other than that, I think, you guys will like the game if you're a JRPG fan. It's very good. And we just talked about the first one. And we'll eventually get into Origins. I might do a review of Origins as well. And Origins plays different than the first game, but they're both very good. They both link together very nice. They both have incredible stories. And again, this comes out summer 2023. If you guys have any questions in the comments, or if it was confusing, I know I just talk, and this was like not scripted, it's just kind of on the fly, just off memory. Please feel free to ask, and I'll get back to it as soon as I can. But hope you guys enjoy it. Highly hope they don't mess it up like the Tales of Symphonia remasters. And with that, guys, I'm going to let you to it. Thanks for checking out another video, and you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, peace.